And that recording will be available in a few days, so no need to take extensive notes. Just relax, enjoy, absorb the information. We will have questions and answers, and Lise will be controlling the Q&A. If you could use the chat function, which is this button here all the way over to the left, I appreciate that. I'll monitor questions, which we'll cover at the end. So let's get going here. I'm very excited to introduce our presenter today. Lise Leblanc is a principal for LP Consulting and has been working with agricultural and industry for the past 30 years on developing successful residual programs. Her unique understanding of the agricultural market, as well as regulatory requirements, has contributed to the success of beneficial reuse programs for biosolids, wood ash, digestate, offshore drilling waste, paper mill sludge, and construction and demolition waste. Lise was recently inducted into the Divert NS Nova Scotia Hall of Fame for her ongoing commitment to the environment and leadership in waste diversion. And we are also very lucky here at NEBRA to have Lise as a member of our board. And with that, I'm going to pass the presenter role to Lise. Let's find you. There you go.
Great. Thank you very much, Janine. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for attending the Lunch and Learn today. I'm excited to be sharing information with you on the Biosolid management programs in the Atlantic Canadian provinces. Although I'm discussing Atlantic Canada programs, there's a lot of information that I'm going to be talking to you about today that can be carried over to other provinces and states. Biosolids are biosolids regardless of where we are. So right now, if everybody can put yourself on mute, it will reduce the feedback during the presentation. At any time, if you want to ask a question or you have some comments along the way, that makes actually the presentation more fun. Don't forget to unmute yourself, ask your questions, provide your comments, and then when we're done, mute yourself so we can reduce any kind of feedback. It makes it a lot easier to listen. I'm going to try not to skip ahead too quickly because I think it takes a few moments for everybody to get caught up on the slide change. Before I get started, for those of you that don't have a lot of experience with NEBRA, which is Northeast Biosolids and Residuals Association, I want to talk about who we are. So NEBRA is a nonprofit professional association advancing environmentally sound and publicly supported biosolid and residual recycling in New England, New York, and Eastern Canada. I know that I've relied on NEBRA ever since I started my career almost 30 years ago, and they are a valuable resource for any of us. And those in membership include environmental professionals and organizations that will produce, treat, test, consult, and manage biosolids or other large volume recyclable organic residuals. As Janita mentioned, we do work with wood ash as well as biosolid, IPP lime. We're working on a huge tonnage product that's grits and dregs coming from a power company. And NEBRA provides so much resources and people that also have similar experiences that you can share information and really help move forward the whole sustainable organic to waste to resource programs in your provinces or states. NEBRA is funded by membership fees, very important, donations, and we occasionally get project grants. So the more members we have, the stronger an association we are. So what am I going to talk to you today during your Lunch and Learn? Well, we're going to go over provincial and federal regulations, what's the difference in each of the Atlantic Canada provinces, and I will make that fun for you. Often people can get lost in the weeds because there are slight differences between provinces, and when do you have to follow provincial and when do you have to follow federal regulations? And what's the right type of test that you need to get approval to use biosolids in your programs? I'm going to talk about some various provincial programs, what's happening in each of the Atlantic Canadian provinces. And then I'm going to finish up on opportunities and challenges. And some of you have heard me talk about this because I feel very strongly about the fact that we are not often prepared enough for the challenges. And if we know the risks and how to manage those risks from the beginning, the opportunities are endless. So I have a feeling I'll still be talking about that 10 years from now. So let's look at the Biosolid program regulations in Atlantic Canada. First of all, we have the Atlantic Canada Wastewater Guidelines Manual, and all the provinces can follow that. The regulations for metals and pathogens are actually not as tight as CFIA regulations or some of the Atlantic Canada provincial regulations that have been put in place. So for instance, in Nova Scotia, in addition to the Atlantic Canada Wastewater Guidelines, we have guidelines for land application and storage of municipal biosolids in Nova Scotia, which is much stricter than the Atlantic Canada guidelines. And New Brunswick also have developed their own guidelines, which is somewhat following the Nova Scotia guidelines. So in essence, PEI is the only province that is following the Atlantic Canada wastewater guidelines. And I'm going to show you what the differences are. Newfoundland has essentially no programs, and land programs are not permitted, but I'll talk to you about where they're moving with possible new ideas in Newfoundland. So let's talk about, first of all, the Atlantic Canada wastewater guidelines. They have a Class EQ, Class A, and Class B. Before I talk about these numbers, I really want to highlight at the top where it says your biosolid maximum regulated concentration levels. These are your metals in dry weight, and these are not leachate. These are totals in ppm or milligrams per kilogram. Often by the time I'm called in by a municipality or a company working on a biosolid program, and they want to get either a provincial approval or they want to move forward and get a fertilizer labeled through CFIA, and I look at all their research, which has taken time and money, they have done, not research, sorry, test analysis, they have done the incorrect testing. Wastewater treatment, you're used to sending in samples. It's on a leachable metal in milligrams per liter or some sort of unit like that, and you continue to do that. And you can't take that data with your solids and determine what your dry weight would be. It's a completely different test. So then you got to start all over from the beginning, resend in your product, take multiple tests, spend more money, and it probably sets you back a few months. So when you're looking at a biosolid program, it is not the leachable. And typically, when engineers send it in, they tend to look at it in a wastewater way. So make sure, if you're looking at a program, to get the right test results. Now let's get back to Atlantic Canada wastewater. So there are 3 classes, and PEI is the only province that follows this guideline and has not developed stricter guidelines. So for them, it is the easiest province to develop biosolid programs. If you take a look at this and you look at Class EQ, the arsenic is 41 and their Class A and B is 75. Well, in most other provinces, Class A for arsenic would only be 13. So you can see, just even from getting an EQ, you have significantly more room in your product to have a higher arsenic level. And that, for EQ, you can apply biosolids on the land, no restrictions, no approvals. And most of all their metals are much higher than Class A, B, or even some of them from CFIA. So let's take a look at how they compare. A lot of numbers here, but let's just pick out a few. So for Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Class A, these are the levels of metals that you need to be able to apply biosolids on the land without an approval or with no restrictions, meaning we can apply it wherever we want to. So those numbers under Class A is 13. If you compare Class A under the Atlantic Canada, it's 75. Even if you look at exceptional quality EQ for that, and I'm going to call it PEI because PEI is the one that follows it, it's 41. So if you had a product in PEI that had an arsenic level of 40, you could not apply it in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick unless you have a CFIA fertilizer label. You would have to be 13. If you see Class B, which is what Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and CFIA, those are the levels that are determined. And for Class B, if you're in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and you're following provincial regulations, you cannot land apply on agriculture. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. Those are for non-agricultural applications, and there's a lot of work that you need to do to get an approval. So there's very little Class B applied, and you'll see why. But what I like is that typically if I'm working with any kind of biosolid or residual program, if I can get it approved as a fertilizer under CFIA, my numbers are able to be much higher for metals. So for instance, arsenic again. I don't have to follow 13 for provincial reg. I can have it as high as 75 under my CFIA regulation number. The CFIA are putting together new regulations. They were supposed to be out in April, and they're not out yet. And currently right now, under a label as a fertilizer, full-fledged fertilizer, you have the Walker enriched product, and you have Listec. Under CFIA, under Schedule 2, you have pellets, biosolid pellets, and they all have to follow a different rule. I think moving forward, CFIA is looking at removing municipal biosolids away from the full-fledged labeling and moving them back to Schedule. I hear something, so somebody's not muted. You have a little kid in the background. That's you.
You can mute everyone, Lise, if it's going to continue.
Oh, we're good. Okay. Where was I? Talk about CFIA.
Can you say what CFIA stands for, Lise?
Yes.
CFIA?
Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So they're responsible for the production and sale of products. The reason why I like to use CFIA and go through the process to get a label for any residual is that the levels are higher than the provincial levels. But if you have a CFIA label, then it becomes a fertilizer and it no longer has to meet Class A, Class B, Class A type regulations that the province has. And as I was mentioning, they're looking at moving municipal biosolids back to Schedule 2, of which we do not want that. But if you add a product to your biosolid that is on what would have to be regulated, then your whole product becomes regulated. And some of you might think, why would you want to be regulated? Well, whether you're regulated or not, you still have to meet those metals and pathogen levels if you are going to sell or apply on land. So if you have your CFIA label, it takes you one level up. So it's well worth to get regulated if you're able to. And it makes it easier when working with environment as well, because environment, the provincial environment people have a lot more faith in the product and are typically tend to be a lot more supportive of a biosolid product that has a CFIA label. Let's go back to looking at these Atlantic Canada wastewater guidelines. You can see here under Class A, for the rest of the Maritime provinces except for PEI, cadmium, the maximum we can do a land application is 3. While exceptional quality that PEI follows is 39, which actually puts it higher than Class B or CFIA maximum levels. So many products that are applied in PEI typically fit under Class EQ, and they don't need to get a CFIA label. Let's see here. New Brunswick, they've also thrown in an extra class, Class C for biosolids. And that means if the biosolid meets Class B metal levels, but they have a high pathogen content, then there's a Class C, and they increase the entry time. And I'm going to, for those of you in New Brunswick, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And depending on what product that you have blended with your biosolids to make a higher value product, you may have to do dioxin, furans, and PCBs testing on your product. So let's look at an example. You have gotten your product tested, and you want to know, can that product be land applied, and can it be sold? So I put a sample biosolid product test. You can see here that the biosolid tested 25 for cadmium, which means if you're in PEI, you meet Class exceptional quality. But if you're in any of the other provinces or with CFIA, you are too high. You cannot use that product. It is a waste product as far as they're concerned. Copper, let's say you have 1200. You're above CFIA, but if you're in PEI, you have 1500, so you fit. So far, if you're in PEI, you can use a product land application. Lead, it's 400. It's even above the EQ, but it does meet CFIA. So the lead would actually be under Class A for PEI. And another one I want to point out, which is mercury. Under CFIA, it's 14. Your product tested out 15, so you could not get a CFIA label, but it does meet 100 for the Atlantic Canada guidelines. I find selenium really interesting because Class A for the other Atlantic provinces, maximum levels are 2, which is based on the compost maximum level. And 2, most labs, that is your reporting limit. So if you get 3, you no longer meet your Class A, but because of lab error, it could actually be 1. And I know here in Nova Scotia, we have been lobbying the government with a selenium paper, especially with the fact that Atlantic Canada, our selenium levels are so low that we actually add selenium to our animal feed. So to have 2 as a minimum amount to apply biosolid on agricultural land makes no sense. But we have not been successful yet, but stay tuned. So, can my product be land applied? It cannot be land applied, not even in PEI that has a broader, higher levels of metals, because your lead tested at 400. It is not a product, it is a waste and has to be treated as such. Even if you test it under the 300, you are over the CFIA levels. So you won't make a Schedule 2, so you can't have a label. So what you can do is you can provide the product for land application with various clients for free. You just can't sell it. Because in order for you to sell a product, it has to have a CFIA label either under your full registration or under Schedule 2. So you can see how easy it is to get lost in the weeds for someone that hasn't dealt a lot with biosolid programs. What's the right test? What province am I in? Are they following their own stricter guidelines? Are they following Atlantic Canada? Or am I going to go for a CFIA? There's a lot of things to keep straight, but there are people around that can help you with that. All right. Now that I've got you completely confused on all the regulations, let's move forward and look at each of the Atlantic Canada Biosolid programs. So in Nova Scotia, we have stricter regulations. I'm from Nova Scotia, and we have guidelines for the land application and storage of municipal biosolids. The ag land application programs are only for Class A biosolids. If you meet Class A, environment determines that this is a beneficial reuse and is not a waste product. Therefore, you have unrestricted use and no approval is required. And what do I mean by unrestricted use? You can apply that product on ag land, you can apply that product on recreational land, you can apply that product on gardens, you can apply that product anywhere, of course, following environmental guidelines. In Class B, which are the only two classes we have in Nova Scotia, you need an approval. You cannot apply any biosolid product that on ag land or on residential applications. You can only apply Class B on reclamation, forest land, public lands, construction sites, recreational lands like parks, and on commercial sod. But the kicker is there is so many hoops to jump through for Class B. You have site requirements. Your pH has to be between 6 and 8, and I can tell you, in all of Atlantic Canada, you know, if these sites have not been applying lime, which the majority do not, I would suspect their pHs are between 5 and 5.5. So it's very difficult to find land that's within that. You have to do soil analysis of all the metals to make sure your background levels aren't too high. You have to ensure it's a certain land slope. You can only apply on less than 3%. You have to gather the data on depth to groundwater and bedrock. And it cannot have a flood risk. You can only have a flood risk once every 20 years. Then you have to follow separation distances. You have to have a land management plan. And even more difficult, you have to have a letter from the municipality where that land is saying that it's not against municipal regulations. And as you know, it's very difficult to get approval from municipalities. You have to have public meetings, and you have to put signage, 4 signs at every corner of your land. Excuse me. And lastly, you have to be monitoring it and reporting it. So you can well imagine there is very little Class B applied. Actually, none that I know of. So what are a few of our land application programs? Well, a very successful one is the Halifax Walker Environmental Enviro, which we now call Enrich program. Halifax and Walkers produces about 36,000 tons per year. Currently, the plant is empty, and we ran out this spring. It was a beautiful spring for getting product out, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's affected. And it has a CFIA label. So it is classified as a fertilizer, and it has to meet all the same requirements as fertilizer. Successful program, booked it almost 100% booked for the next 2 years. The other Class A product is Pictou County, and they have a contract with a farmer. It's more of a sludge type product, and they're the only farm in Nova Scotia. Well, no, there's another one with a small unit, but they're the only farm with a large liquid sludge application that can inject it into the soil. So this particular farmer has been working with Pictou County for at least the past 10 to 15 years, and we work with this farmer developing a nutrient management plan for him so that we're always making sure that he doesn't run out of land to be able to utilize a biosolid. We balance out his soils. So what about the other biosolid sludge septic programs? Processed biosolids can be used as a landfill cap for vegetation, after the cell is complete, but it can't be used for daily cover. Some municipalities will ship to New Brunswick, to Envirom, that uses it to make compost. Another company, other municipalities will use a company to clean out the lagoons, dewater the biosolids with geotubes, but currently they're having a lot of issues because they can't meet Class A for some of the metals. So we're looking at what can we do to improve that. So right now they're all sitting in big geotubes or in piles waiting to try to figure out what to do with it. In New Brunswick, they have a little bit of a different system, and they manage their biosolids by sectors. And all the sectors work together. So they have a wastewater sector lead, they have a compost sector lead, a septic sector lead, a land application lead, and a fertilizer plant lead. So they're all involved and meet together to discuss what biosolid programs can exist in New Brunswick. They also develop guidelines for the beneficial use of industrial byproducts as a soil amendment. So there are two classes that they have that can be land applied. Class A, and that meets your CCME Category A for metals and pathogens, which is what I've already showed you for compost in Class A, which is very tight regulations, like say for instance arsenic at 13 rather than a CFIA fertilizer at 75. Now, if it Class AD, that meets CCME for metals, but they can have higher pathogen levels, and biosolids could never be classed AD. If it falls into AD, it can't be land applied. It has to meet Class A. Class B, it meets a Category B for metals and pathogens. You can have biosolids under Class B and land apply it, but pretty much all the restrictions follow the similar restrictions as I discussed for Nova Scotia. If you have a Class BD, that's meeting Class B for metals, but has higher pathogen levels, biosolids cannot be a BD. D means delayed time, the amount of time between applying the product and when you could go back into there. And then they made a Class C, and this is for biosolids that have a high level of pathogens, but meets Class B for metals. You can apply it on ag land, but you can apply it on sod, nursery, and use it as a landfill cover. What are some of the programs in New Brunswick? New Brunswick is very big on composting. We have a large program through Moncton, and Envirom does a lot of biosolid composting, and that compost is sold. Then we also have septage and some lagoon systems. And some municipalities will accept septage directly from the truck, but most will not, so it has to go to preliminary treatments first. So typically they send it to Clean Earth, either in Fredericton or St. John, which filters the waste before it can enter municipal systems, which can be quite costly. And there are some private haulers that have gone through the environmental impact assessment process so that they can develop their own septic treatment systems before they can take it to the municipality. And then once it's gone through the municipal treatments, it gets sent for composting. When you have biosolids compost in New Brunswick, no public notification is required as long as it meets CCME Class A. Compost facilities must be previously approved to be able to handle those biosolids. If the biosolid compost does not meet Class A, it can be landfilled at approved landfills, and it cannot be used for landfill cover to finish your landfill cell, only clean fill. And here's an example of a very successful program. This is through the Moncton program, TransAqua. They have been composting biosolids for a very long time. In 2009, they don't have a CFIA. They have a B&Q certification, which is essentially a Class A, and that is done through Quebec, which is very similar to CCME. And they will sell it for about $15 a yard. They've developed their own labels on compost soil conditioners, and it is a very successful program. Now let's move to Prince Edward Island. Their standards that they use to assess biosolid quality and beneficial reuse is based on Atlantic Canada wastewater. They have EQ, which I talked about, unrestricted land application, and as far as they're concerned, CFIA products also then move into the EQ standards. Metal levels are higher than Class A for all other programs. Class A and B require approval for ag land application. You know, they have to go through all the process similar to Nova Scotia, but they can be used on ag land, where in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick they cannot. And but it's not allowed for lawns and gardens. This is the easiest province to have a biosolid program, and it's been my experience that the environment staff strongly support beneficial reuse. As we all know, PEI is mainly agriculture and tourism, and they understand the benefits of sustainable reuse to be able to improve soil health. So I won't go through all this, but it's similar distance to water course. If you're Class B, minimum distances, soil criteria, sludge application, minimum pH, nutrient management plans, all those things are part of Class B. But Class EQ and Class A have a very wide spectrum of the metal levels and pathogens. So they've got 3 programs. They have the Summerside, which has a CFIA, which would also meet EQ. They have Charlottetown, which has a Class A product. And the smaller municipalities will treat with geotubes and typically meet Class A. As you can remember when I talked about Nova Scotia, we're not meeting Class A under geotubes. The reason why PI is because their Class A has much higher metal levels than the rest of us. So Summerside, they have a CFIA label, unrestricted use, no approval, and I really like how environment says for the separation distances, we recommend courtesy setbacks. So I'm going to be using that from now on. Walkers and LP Consulting started working with Summerside last year because they have had this program for about 12 years and have never emptied the barn, even though they only produce about 5,000 tons a year. We started working with them last year, emptied the barn 3 times, and right now the barn's empty, and I can certainly move at least 3 to 4 times the production that they have. And that's all about understanding the market, understanding what farmers need, and being able to talk to farmers about the product, how it will benefit them. Charlottetown, they have EQ Biosolid. And one farmer was awarded management of their biosolids on his fields, and he applies it on corn and grains. And small municipalities, about half of them have lagoons with a 15 to 20-year management plan. So they either haul to Summerside or Charlottetown, which includes septage, which then gets added to the 2 programs. Or some of them with their lagoons, they will screen and dewater, put it through the geotube, which usually meets Class A, and then they can land apply. The challenge that they have is that the restaurants, all the grease traps, all go into the septic tanks. So the treatment plants are really struggling on how to deal with that. So they said if anybody out there knows how to fix that, they would love to hear from you. Labrador and Newfoundland, they have no beneficial reuse programs, but they're very interested in doing something better than just taking it to the landfill. And interestingly enough, there's a partial landfill ban. So in St. John's, there isn't a landfill ban. They have primary treatment, the material screened out, and then put through the AD. They dry it to 25%, and then they landfill it. Now, I have quite a number of farm clients that are just outside of St. John that would really like to use that product. So hopefully we can move forward with the beneficial reuse rather than wasting all those nutrients and organic matter in the landfill. Small towns would put it through a primary treatment, dewater, and landfill it. Now, the areas that have a landfill ban, these towns and rural areas contract with one company, which is Priorities, which they're the only commercial non-municipal septic waste disposal facility in Newfoundland. They will take it and compost it with C&D waste, but they don't clean out the C&D waste, so they can't ensure quality. There's physical contaminants in there, so they can't sell it or land apply it, and it's used for landfill cover. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in Newfoundland Labrador to get product on land. Let me check the time. Make sure I'm not running too late. So let's talk about opportunities and risks. I think there's tremendous opportunities for Biosolid program. It's just all in managing risk. Municipalities are recognizing the importance of participating in the green economy, and I hear that more and more from some of the municipalities. You know, they have a small budget, so you need to be more creative on how you get to Class A if you are in any province besides PEI. But it's important for us as a society to move forward and look at how we can beneficially reuse local sustainable resources. So a successful Biosolid program can provide municipalities with savings or revenue. They can improve their public image by working with agriculture to increase soil health and combat climate change. And as we all know, we are facing climate change every day. There's future opportunity for carbon credits. And to participate in a green economy by providing local sustainable nutrients and organic matter, because regardless of how we move forward out of all our COVID or climate change or anything, ultimately food is what's the most important. So I just want to talk a little bit about potential carbon offset credits. I've been researching this, and I think there's huge potential for the Biosolid industry. Municipalities can partner with agriculture to earn these carbon offset credits, providing that agriculture follows the protocols that support land stewardship. And a lot of farmers now are doing nutrient management plans, so all of it is documented, which then will make it easier to be able to determine carbon offset credits. And as this happens, it will incentivize the increased adoption of using Biosolid programs. Research is providing the science to include these waste to resource programs to reduce our heavy reliance on fossil resources and replacing part of our agricultural products to reduce the indirect carbon dioxide from production processes from inorganic fertilizer programs that we get from USA, Morocco, and Russia, from our lime programs, which Canada desperately needs lime, but we mine it. If there's other products out there to reduce mining of lime, carbon credits, and then the whole area about carbon sequestration with farming practices that capture carbon dioxide from production of industry. So there is a general default value that was verified through the carbon crediting model of BEAM, Biosolids Emissions Assessment Model. And the research is saying that 4 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions per kilogram for nitrogen and 2 kilograms for phosphorus. So I looked at using the HRM Walker Enviro average nitrogen phosphorus analysis, and that test result indicates that it could be reducing the following carbon dioxide equivalent, GHG offsets, of nitrogen of 1.4 million kilograms and phosphorus of 648,000 kilograms. That's significant, and that doesn't even include the reduction GHG by reducing mining of liming by utilizing Lafarge CKD waste, or improving the carbon sequestration, or even how efficient the plant is. So if we can start getting carbon credits for the municipalities, which then can filter down through so that farmers benefit, the plants benefit, companies who work with these programs benefit, environment benefits. So I think that the potential is tremendous, and we should be looking at that. Other opportunities is healthy agricultural fields increase tourism value. You look at those two pictures on the left, you know, you see those in tourism photos. Tourists like to drive through pretty farmland. You see to the right with poor soil health, that could really use biosolids. That's not pretty to be driving by. So we're not giving enough credit to how our biosolids can improve our tourism value. And what about the economics? For instance, 35,000 tons of the HRM Walker Enviro has an impact in agriculture of $4.6 million per year for lime and fertilizer. That's just from our poop. We are injecting $4.6 million worth and providing $700,000 of additional local trucking income to these small local trucking companies. That's a huge return into these industries. And we're not talking enough about that. Agriculture, regardless if you're Atlantic Canada, United States, Europe, across Canada, we need more soil amendments to improve and maintain soil health. And we can't do it from inorganic fertilizers only. Our crop varieties have been bred for higher yields, which means they pull more out of the soils. Especially in Atlantic Canada, our soils are naturally acidic with very low nutrient content. And the climate impact, we need resilient soils. Our soils, if they are not at optimum levels, and I can tell you there are very little agricultural soils across North America that are optimum, they are not resilient. So when we have a lot of rain in the spring and the fall and drought in the summer, they don't handle it well and the crops suffer. Even with a climate change that will negatively impact our crops, if you have optimum soil with good soil health, of which biosolids contribute to that, yeah, there'll be a lower yield, but they will be able to come through it a lot better. And we don't talk about that. This is one slide that I give to a lot of presentations to farm groups, is weather, climate change impacts, severe rainfall events, short period of time, droughty summers, wet spring and fall, and they need amendments. And more as our farmers use amendments like biosolids, they want more. So there's lots of biosolid benefits to agriculture. I really don't have time to go through that too much, but as we all know from the biosolid industry, we know it improves our soil chemical, biological, and physical properties, improves nutrient retention, reduces compaction, increases organic matter and water holding capacity. When I go out there and look at fields right now, of which we've had no rain for essentially 2 months, I can tell the difference in crop production in my biosolid fields and my non-biosolid fields. It's holding on to that water better. And as we increase our organic matter, we improve our soil carbon balance, which stimulates microbial activity for a healthier soil environment. And of course, the economic impact that biosolid programs provides. Now, there are risks need to be managed. Rather you use it as a beneficial reuse through land application or energy recovery, or non-reuse options like landfill covering. Nothing is risk-free. Regulations on managing biosolids continue to evolve and change as our lab techniques continue to improve. What if your options can't be used as a cover for your organics? What if the lagoons are overflowing, but you can't land apply it because of increase in standard levels? And what if the company's been removing your biosolids, but now they don't have anywhere to go? So we need to be looking at those risks. And when we look at companies that put in bid proposals for biosolids for tipping fee contracts, they often fail to budget for contingency planning. And any kind of organic material will need to budget for contingency planning and have the support of the municipality. Organic programs, particularly biosolids, are vulnerable to many situations which is not recognized by municipalities and industry. And if we budget for it and we recognize the risks, we have less issues out in the public. Let's talk about worst case scenarios. I'm not saying this happens all the time, and I don't want to scare you away from biosolid program, but let's look at the very worst case scenarios, because if you're ready for that, then you're ready for anything. And the first is lack of storage. You should have 12 months. We don't have 12 months because it's expensive to build storages. Government recommends to our farmers 7-month storage, but it's not working anymore. With our weather patterns, some years even a 9-month storage isn't enough. And yet, say with some of our biosolid programs, we have 3-month storage. No wonder we get caught in very expensive situations. And if agriculture are stuck with getting the manure out because of bad weather, they're not going to use your biosolids. And this happens after you've already made the sale. Weather is always going to impact the sales potential. And sometimes what you find is a municipality or company get really cranky with agriculture because they're like, why aren't they taking it? My building is full. Well, so are the agricultural manure pits. And if it looks like what these pictures are, they are not interested in helping you out of your problem because they already have their own. There's off-site storage challenges, extra trucking, extra management costs with no return on those storage costs. What about making more product while your storage is building? You can work with farmers on an off-site storage, and we have, but you have to be careful on how you develop that deal because that affects the future of your program. You cannot be seen as paying them to take your product. It does two things. It further reduces the value of your product to the whole industry. And the other thing is farmers see it as urban dumping their waste on rural areas. We don't want them to have that attitude out there. We want them to have a partnership attitude, which is very important. What about you get an opportunity to increase taking more on the front side because you're going to get more tipping fee, but yet you forgot to identify what to do with that extra product at the back. That could end up costing you a lot of money to deal with that. Some, because they have not have contingency plans, will sell the product but pay for the trucking or vice versa. I've seen some companies pay for lagoon storage rental because, of course, liquids are more vulnerable. You can't just pile it in the back field. Sometimes the company will do the application, the equipment, maintenance, and staff costs, which is very difficult to get back from agriculture. And I always tell companies you do not want to be in the business of invoicing farmers because they don't tend to pay very quickly. So if you partner up with someone who's used to invoicing farmers, that's where you move ahead. Cost of maintaining large piles of product on your off-site storage might never sell. So therefore, worst case scenarios always happen with companies and municipalities that lack the understanding of the market and not developing close relationships and not moving the right product. I've seen companies have to end up paying, $50,000 to over $200,000 when dealing with issues. If we go in it already knowing the risks and being prepared, you don't have to face this. And how do you build a program to mitigate these risks? Well, make sure you have it budgeted. Make sure you know demand changes, weather changes. What about world economics? I'll have that sometimes. How come we sold so much product to the wheat producers last year, but not this year? Well, first of all, like last year, we had a big rain, so most of them died off. If you look at this wheat 10-year chart, well, you see a decrease in the sales on the world market. Well, when the decrease in sales happen, they tend to cut their fertilizers first. For me, I see that as an opportunity because I can show my farmers the benefits of how much money they put into a biosolids and, the 4 to 10 times more they're getting out of it. Others that don't understand that selling mentality, they just lose all their sales. You can see here the rise on the top is a fertilizer supply, but the demand on the blue is what farmers buy. And farmers never buy enough of what they need. And again, it's to be able to educate them. And when the price of fertilizers go up, we sell more residuals. When the price of fertilizers go down, we sell less residuals. So we got to change our marketing strategy. Don't expect high returns on your amendments. I think if you save money or, you have some money that can go into a budgeting for worst case scenarios, that's when you're ahead. And take a look at this. Residuals can have more expensive equipment. For instance, there's a fertilizer spreader on the left compared to the residual spreader on the right. Significant difference in time and money. I'm going to speed this up so I can get done by 1 hour. This is another big problem. Is I talk about municipalities and companies working with partners that understand the ag market. But then when that happens, they expect their partners to take on all the risk for the Biosolid program for a very low return rate. This is becoming a #1 issue behind lack of storage. And I think you're going to see municipalities and companies having more of an issue with this. You say, okay, I want company B, I want you to buy the biosolids. Once you take it out of my barn, it's out of my hands, and I want you to pay me X amount of dollars. Well, if on top of that, they're only going to make $1 or $2 a ton, they're not taking on that risk. You need to understand that because it takes time to build a market. When you take the time to build a market and be a real partner, then ultimately it will continue to increase and the price per ton will continue to increase. Try to handle the amendment as little as possible to reduce increased costs, but if you do handle it, investigate value-added products. The higher the value of your product, the further you can truck it, because trucking is what always impacts the sale of your product. And I see increasing carbon credit potential is a great bonus to the municipality, to the company, and to the farmer. Successful amendment programs take a lot of work. And even when you have a program that's going really well, I'll see municipalities say, okay, well, that's done, no problem. That's when you start having problems. And farmers want 100% contaminant-free products, which is very difficult for any of these programs. So it's an ongoing education. And what about the PR? Odor issues, public concerns. Agriculture does not want to use products that turn their neighbors and communities against them. So we need to work as partners and not just wash our hands and let a company or someone else just take care of it. Effective marketing program. If you do not prove your product saves money on fertilizers or lime while providing an increase in yield, they're not going to participate. Every input dollar counts. Not all farms have the same demand. I see some people, they look up the stats of the local area and they're like, okay, let's put a building up here. Well, that doesn't give you the right information because you don't even know what kind of farm that would be. Biosolids are limited to certain crops. And you can't use it on any crops to grow fruits and vegetables. Therefore, it further restricts your opportunities. Know your market. Know what kind of product that can be sold. Then there's issues, liquid versus solid product. And work with your team. You need a team, and it goes beyond the engineering team that builds your building for you. It goes beyond just moving product out the door. Ensure your market's within that 100 to 200 kilometer range because it's trucking, as I said, that impacts the sale of your product. Trucking typically will increase the price on other traditional products. And what about investigating opportunities to team up with someone else? Here you can see I did some tabletop studies looking at blending digestate with either ash or CKD, doing the analysis on it and seeing how I can make a higher value product to have the agriculture community line up for it. So, in summation, there are lots of opportunities and challenges, but all those challenges can be overcome if you are prepared for it. Industry has been quite frustrated when they produce a beneficial product, but find that selling to farmers isn't about how come they're not calling for it. Industry needs to liaison with the agriculture community, which includes your ag service providers and government. Proof of product. Show your product works. Set out demonstration fields. Give presentations. Get the farmers to know you, because once they know you and you're a face and not just a name, they trust you. And another big thing that I tend to run into a lot, they need a lot of product in a short period of time. I sometimes have problem finding trucks. Or I have a municipality that says, well, they close at 4 o'clock, but yet we still need to move another 600 ton, because if we don't move it, they're canceling their product the next day. So you have to do, if you're going to do a program, you have to make sure that you ship out that product in a short period of time. If municipal biosolid programs are developed with these challenges in mind, you're going to have huge benefits economically, socially, and environmentally. And these programs are a win-win for everyone. LP Consulting, we work with biosolids and residuals, and just in the Maritimes alone, we ship out about 100,000 tons per year, and we don't have enough. We run out of all products. We have no product to ship out from any of our companies that we work with in Atlantic Canada, and we want more. Because as the agriculture community continues to use these products and see how it works on their farms, it becomes a critical product that they want. And now I have farmers that get mad at me because I can't ship them 500 to 1,000 tons of biosolid product right now because I only have 100 tons in the barn and it's promised to someone else. So we're always looking at what other residuals are out there. And if these programs are managed right, that's what you're going to find in every province, every state. I see huge potential for these programs to grow. Is it difficult? Yes, but it's worthwhile to be able to provide local sustainable resources, deal with the risks, and build on the benefits. And it can be done. You just have to have the right people and the right attitude in place. So that's my presentation on what's going on in Atlantic Canada. I hope you found it worthwhile. I have my phone number, my email. If you have any questions, I'm sure you can probably hear within my voice that I love talking about this stuff. And we're very proud that we just launched our webpage. Working the land is not just a living, it's a life, a business, and a passion. And in there, we actually have 3 sections for people to go to. If you're a farmer, we have a whole farmer section to click on. If you're industry, about waste to resource connections. And then we also have a section where we do a lot of research out on farmers' fields, which also include residuals and biosolids, because there's nothing like having a farm tour for them to see the tremendous impact that biosolids can have on their soil health and their crop growth. So anybody has anything to say?
We do have some questions for you. That was awesome. I got more of an education than I was expecting. So a couple of questions, if we have time, and then I'll suggest maybe I can ask you to just write up the answers, and I can send them out to the other ones. But one question was, can farmers pay for transport and not the actual product to avoid the need for a label?
Can they? Okay, so as
They're
I
just
mentioned,
paying for the transport, not the actual product.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. Yes, that could probably get around that.
Someone's got a good idea there. So the other question that I really want to ask you is related to PFAS. And, you know, it's a big issue here in the United States and even just over the border. But can you talk a little bit about PFAS, what's going on there, and if it's having any impact on your programs?
It is not like what's happening in the United States. We're just starting to talk about it, and we're looking at what you guys are doing.
Oh, no.
So right now, at least for the programs that I've been involved with, or I talk to my fellow colleagues that run their programs as well, haven't seen an impact yet, but of course, seeing what's going on in the States, we know it's coming.
Okay, so a little premature on that question. Can you talk a little bit about the Biosolids processing technology, and how does that require approval or anything like that in Canada? You know, permitting.
Oh yeah, every facility has to have an approval through their environment, which is separate from the program potential approval.
Okay. So again, I think, you know, we're running out of time. I want to be respectful to folks' time. So I have 7 questions. Lise, if you don't mind, I can get those to you. We could follow up when we send out the link to the recording. I think that would that would work well. So. And
if anybody has any questions, please, I love to talk about biosolids, so give me a call or send me an email.
All right. Well, I really want to thank you, Lise, for sharing your expertise and for your optimistic outlook on the opportunities. It was quite inspiring. And again, thanks for being part of the board. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We will follow up with the recording and answers to the questions that we did not get to. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon and a great weekend. Thank you.
And if you haven't joined NEBRA, I highly recommend that you do. They are the #1 association where you could get help and where you could get all the information you need on any issue with biosolids.
And thanks for that plug, Lise. Perfect ending. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.